feel like even in 2 months, some of those kids could come back and like middle school be like 2 inches taller. And
I know.
I
know. That's how Scrum does. I think it's
yeah,
probably
it's
momentum.
probably just easier, and you can plan.
And like people are thinking about soccer in the fall.
True.
Maybe they don't want to try. Maybe they've. That's what he does. So then we have a lot of momentum in the fall. 3 really good tournaments, and then we do a fall box that he puts on.
Nice. Where?
Jones Road. Or no, sorry, not Burnett Park.
Burnett Park.
Right in that indoor rink.
Really?
Yeah. So we do a fall, very late fall, like basically right before Christmas. Like, so basically we do like 5 sessions once a week up until Christmas. Then we take a break, and then we do a winter session from February through March.
Okay.
Where we're indoors and just literally just teaching them to be physical. And then
smaller space.
Yeah. Then we start back into like traditional lacrosse.
When do you get going in the spring? I mean, well, your kids are too young for school.
April. Yeah.
Okay.
Because
So
there's no school ball.
Yeah. Did you play in high school?
I walked on to Cornell and then walked off.
You walked off. That's a good way of putting it.
I played, and then I was an offensive midi and was a fogo. I was an offensive midi and a face-off midi at Ludden.
Okay.
And then went there with the intention of being a strict fogo, and broke my wrist my senior year, or like my senior year in high school, and I re-broke it again during tryouts.
Okay.
And then it was vividly clear to me that I was not good enough to be a third line midi, offensive midi. So I just went and played club.
What year was that?
My freshman year.
Which was like year?
05.
05. So that was, I mean, prime Cornell. They were very good back then.
Yeah. So in hindsight, would I have just stayed on the team for the experience and I loved all the guys? I don't know, maybe. But I also was a pre-med and economics major. So
with all that extra time, it's hard to justify being on a team when you know.
That's what, didn't make sense.
Who that was like Sebald, right? Was he your year?
He was kind of the reason I didn't like.
You saw him play.
I was like, man, that's different than what I'm used to.
He was a freak. He was nasty. But they I mean, what, a few years later, that's when they played Cuse to the overtime game.
Exactly.
In the national championship. So you decided lacrosse wasn't for you in college.
Yeah. I enjoyed club still. That was fun. Got to travel with clubs.
Yeah.
So I did that. But ultimately, that's when I grew up on a farm, so I thought I was going to go back to the farm, either run some other large dairy farm, because I knew what I was into was more the business aspect of farming. And and if you don't know, like, farming has changed a ton since I was in high school till now. Basically, back then there was a lot of small dairy farms around that you passed and you're like, oh, that's a pretty farm with cows outside. And it turned much more into a business where if you didn't milk 800 to 2,500 cows, there was really no way to be cash flow positive in the dairy industry. So
the quantity.
It was changing. Yeah. And that was interesting to me because I understood the business so well. So I went to Cornell either thinking I wanted to go the veterinarian route or I wanted to go run a large dairy farm. And that was kind of what my freshman and sophomore year looked like. I was kind of debating which one of those routes I was going to go.
So how did you choose classes based off that? Were you like, I want to know the business side of that, so I'm going to general business? I
had to take a lot of science classes just because I was pre-med. Until my junior year, I was in a bunch of science classes and then realized I didn't really want to be a vet. I ended up interning for a large animal vet to basically find out if that was something I wanted to do. And I quickly realized I just wanted to own a vet practice. I didn't really want to be a vet.
Yeah.
And just like law, you have to be a veterinarian to own a vet practice. You can't. Like you and I couldn't go.
You have to be a practicing?
You have to be a veterinarian.
Okay.
You don't necessarily have to be a practicing.
Yeah.
And I kind of thought, I don't know, there's a lot of businesses out there in the world. I don't know if I really need to go through vet school just to own a small animal vet practice. So I dropped pre-med and became a applied economics and management major at Cornell.
Okay.
So at that point, I interned for a financial planning firm, Wells Fargo in Syracuse, and did more of that and kind of said, okay, I could see a future in this.
When were you like, I don't know if owning a dairy farm is going to be the answer for me either. At what point?
My dad made that decision for me. I ended up losing my grandfather to a asthma-induced heart attack he was 69.
Oh, wow.
And like a big role model in my life. And so I was
Who was
18.
a dairy farmer?
Yeah, he was my dad's dad. So he was the second generation of our family farm.
Okay.
And once he passed from an asthma-induced heart attack, I had allergy-induced asthma as a kid. My dad's like, we're selling the cows. So my dad sold the cows to make that decision for me.
Is that from the cows, the allergy-induced asthma?
I just have allergies to basically everything a cow eats, right? Like, so hay, oats, wheat, all that good stuff that as a regular consumer, as a regular guy, I don't have any allergies. I'm fine. But when you're just in that all day, it was too much. And I would end up getting like allergy-induced asthma. And my grandpa had it. He managed it, but it ended up killing him. Yeah. So my dad's like, we're not doing this. I'm going to make your decision for you. You're going to go find something else to do and not this.
Is that common that dairy farmers end up with an allergy, or any sort of farmer if they're around something enough?
I think it's just genetic, right? So my great-grandfather didn't have any allergies. My grandfather did. My dad had 0, and like half my siblings do, half don't. So just one of those like generational skipping things that you either have it or you don't.
So you crossed dairy farmer off the list.
Exactly.
Or owning a dairy farm, I should say. Even though the decision was kind of made for you. Still wanted to be in business.
Yeah.
Interned at Wells Fargo. Yeah. What kind of sparked your interest there, or gave you some direction to like, hey, I want to be maybe in wealth management, or in investing? Like, what piqued your interest?
Yeah, I would say my interest was first piqued by 2 really good mentors. So one of them was a large dairy farm, an owner of a large dairy farm who happened to also be my mentor at Cornell. He was one of my professors at Cornell. So early on, he would always let me sit in on all of his finance meetings with his personal finance meetings when he had them at his house. So I basically made money working at his farm all the way through Cornell.
What did that look like? His personal finance meeting?
So like when he had a meeting with him and his wife,
his accountant?
Exactly. When he had his accountant and his advisor come, he would have me and one other Cornell kid. We'd always get to sit in on his meetings. And he basically wanted us to understand how important saving was outside of whatever your business is. So
sounds like a rich dad, poor dad.
It was
scenario.
It was such a really good. It was a great experience for me when I was 17 years old, trying to figure out, why am I sitting in this meeting? And he said, just listen.
Probably a little overwhelming.
Yeah,
you're like, what?
So I did that, and I asked him, I'm like, I think this is interesting. I want to do it. So he helped me get an internship back in Syracuse. And again, I met another mentor, the managing partner of that Wells Fargo office. Was just an awesome guy, kind of took me under his wing and put me in good positions within the business while I was interning to basically try to spark and give me a good experience in that industry. And I loved it and said, I want to work for you when I get out of college. So I spent my first year out of college working for Wells Fargo.
1 year in, what happened?
Well, that's when you start to realize how the industry works and the different types of advisors there are in the world. Yeah. And Wells Fargo is a great company. Merrill Lynch, Morgan Stanley, I can name them all. They're all great companies, but their business model is not what Rockbridge is. Their business model is hopefully to do well by your client, but there's this innate conflict of interest where they can sell a product, make a lot of money off that product.
Higher commission off
that product is suitable for the client, but is it really in the client's best interest? So once I learned that there was a different model and I knew that I was being basically taught nothing but sales training. I wasn't taught about product. I was just taught about sales training. I was like, I'm not going to bring my friends and family into this environment. I need to go find a different place if I want to work with people I care about.
Today's episode of Upstate Impact is brought to you by Renewal by Andersen of Central New York. Summer's here, and it's the perfect time to upgrade your windows. With Renewal by Andersen's exclusive Fibrex material and expert installation, you'll get a cooler, more energy-efficient home that looks as good as it feels. Click the link in our show notes to schedule your free quote today. Renewal by Andersen, superior products, exceptional service. There are so many different types of like financial advisors, right? You're talking about Wells Fargo and some of these banks, but there's also like the insurance side of it. You know, you have Northwestern, New York Life, and then you have like a fiduciary, like I think Rockbridge is, right? Where they actually have to, I mean, what, maybe you can explain that better. Explain what a fiduciary is and what their role is as opposed to, you know, your traditional or any other advisor that we talked about.
Yeah. I mean, the main fiduciary is a terrible word, right? Like no one wants to say it. No, you're right. Like, but it's, no one knows what that is. They know that they have to, they're like, oh, I need to find a fiduciary. But all it really means is that
they're obligated to give you, right?
You're looking for an advisor that has no conflicts of interest and ultimately has your best interest in mind with no financial strings attached. So fiduciary in our world also is tied to the word fee only. Another kind of bad word, like who came up with that? But fee only ultimately means that at the end of the day, Rockbridge is a fee only investment advisory firm, which means we can only get paid by you. So Luke, if you're my client and you work with Rockbridge, you know that if I recommend insurance, if I recommend any sort of product, you know that at the end of the day, I don't get paid by giving that recommendation to you. You're the only one paying me. So ultimately, it probably makes you feel better that whatever advice I'm giving you is truly what makes the most sense for you at that time.
It's a great way of explaining it. Because you're right. When you see fee only, you're kind of like, what, you know, it's not the best way to sell your business, maybe.
Exactly.
Fee only. It's like, oh, I got to pay a fee every time I talk to the guy, or, you know, that's kind of what you go to. But exactly, that's a good way of explaining it, is that you're not going to make more money off signing me up for this as opposed to that, right? You're just going to give blanket advice that you feel is best suited, and I'm just going to pay you directly for that advice.
You got it. And I think that's, so most fee only firms, registered, like independent firms like us, once we know that advice is what we're giving, we tend to go very deep on that advice. And that's what separates us from, I think, a lot of the other firms that we just mentioned, the insurance firms and a lot of the brokerage firms in town, is we're not selling a product. We're not focusing on the product. We're focusing on you and what will help get you from where you are now to where you want to be in 10 or 15 years. So a lot of our advice is planning focused. So it's around tax planning, it's around estate planning, it's around establishing trusts, if that makes sense for you, generational planning, how do we help get your kids involved? So a lot of our advice goes past the layer of investments because ultimately that's what moves the needle in people's lives way faster.
What about just practicing good financial habits? Like, hey, I mean, do you deal with clients, you know, maybe me and my wife come in and say, Pat, you know, we make money, you know, we do pretty well. We can't seem to save. Like, we don't see a path for us to get to 60 years old and be able to go to Florida for a few months or whatever our goal is.
Yeah.
Do you work with them on a day-to-day basis of like, hey, here are some tips that can help you achieve your goal? Like, how thorough is your advising?
It's a good question. I'll start with giving you just a general idea of who we work with, right? Yeah. So Rockbridge manages around $2.3 billion for around 900 families. So the typical client we're working with is much closer to retirement. They've kind of made a lot of those decisions. They've kind of self-selected that they're savers. They've self-selected that they want to retire successfully, and they truly want advice to get them from that point into retirement and then ultimately through a successful retirement. So that most of them have somewhere between $2 and $3.5 million when they find us. But I'm the CEO of the company. I'm still in my late 30s. I have a lot of people that come to me in the exact situation that you just mentioned. So helping them make sure that they're maximizing their company 401k, getting the full match from their employer, saving in Roth IRAs if they're eligible outside of that. That's important.
Yeah.
And ultimately just giving them some short-term goals. I mean, if you start saving young and you save 15%, and your employer match can help with this, right? Most employers are giving you somewhere between 3 and 5% as a match. So if between you and your employer, you can save 15% of your income year over year from your mid 20s into your 60s, you're going to be in a really good spot to help. Hopefully, if you invest it right, you should be able to replace your income in retirement. And so it's getting people to start early, getting people to invest the right way so they don't end up being sold a product and basically being pushed back 5 or 10 years of their success. So just giving them good stepping stones to make sure that they don't find investing daunting. It's just something that is routine and part of their life.
It can be tough though. I mean, it's hard. You know, you say it casually, 15% of your income, but some people may be like, dude, are you crazy? 15%, you know, especially if you got kids and life kind of hits you. However, I feel like you say it casually because at the end of the day, if you really lay it out right and you focus on it, it's really not that hard, right? You got to give some things up. But I think once you start giving up things, all of a sudden you realize what's important and what's not important. Like what makes you happy, right? What makes your family happy? As opposed to what am I just buying because the neighbors have it or because my friends are doing it or because, we need to go on our yearly vacation. It's like, do you really need to go to Disney World or can you just go to Seabreeze for a day?
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. Little things like that. And all of a sudden, you're not going to see it in a year, 2 years, 3 years, but play with an investment calculator and see how much money you can have when you're 60 years old, when you're your parents' age or whatever it is. And I mean, it's always something I've been fascinated with. And, I've been fortunate that it just always interested me. So I've always, as a young, when I was in my 20s, I'm like, I want to start saving, man. Look at how much money I can have when I'm my parents' age or whatever it is. But it doesn't mean it's easy. No. And especially when you have a wife and you have kids and you have a life you want to live today.
And financial literacy is not anything taught in school. And that's not good. And most parents don't do what that Cornell professor did for me and say, hey, come sit in this meeting and learn more about why this is important in these types of meetings, and finding the right person that you trust to help you is something that you need to think about. But at the end of the day, our parents, our grandparents were blessed with the fact that they most likely had a pension, right? So their employer saved for them. They didn't make as much, but they knew that at the end of the day, they're going to get somewhere between 50 and 75% of what they made for life, or for their life plus their spouse's life. So if you have that plus Social Security, that generation was well taken care of. What we don't realize, though, is they made less. So employers these days are paying you more, putting that pressure and putting that responsibility on you. So you just need to think about it that way and say, at the end of the day, if you make $100,000 or you make $75,000, you really make 10% less than that, right? And you got to put it away. You got to have discipline. And once you have discipline, you can do all the other things. And I think you hit home on something that I think is important for people. You are running this podcast, you work for your family business, you coach, you do a lot of different things. Maximizing your human capital is the one thing I think our generation is poor at doing. And they need to be better. And I think in general, the more you can work and basically maximize the amount of time you spend trying to make you and your career better now, set you up so much more successfully later in life when this stuff actually matters to you.
Yeah. It reminds me of, I don't know if you've read it, The Millionaire Next Door.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I would say it's a classic. And I recommend it to anyone. It's, I think, a late 90s release. So I wouldn't say it's dated. I mean, the fundamentals are still very true. But it kind of talks about how, millionaires are not the Hollywood millionaires, right? It's not what you see driving the nice cars, fancy homes. It's like the millionaires are the people you would least expect, right? Because when you see people with all that stuff, you just see money they don't have anymore, right? As opposed to what they've saved. And a lot of those millionaires have their own business. It's not necessarily their primary source of income, right? They might have a job, a W-2 job, but they have a little real estate on the side, or they have a side gig. They have something going for themselves. And that's like whether it puts them over the edge to be able to accumulate wealth, or maybe they're just able to, it takes a while to grind it out. Then all of a sudden they see the fruits of their labor instead of you grinding it out in a job, and then you get a 5% raise in your income.
Exactly.
Right. So you can really capitalize on when you actually bring value. And I think a great way of doing that, as you said, is like kind of exposing yourself to different things, trying different things out. And even if you're not getting paid right away, you still view it as an investment, right? So, maybe you learn what you don't want to do at the very least.
Exactly.
But maybe all of a sudden you tweak it, and all of a sudden there's a demand. And then all of a sudden, oh, wow, I'm actually making money. And all of a sudden I don't have to do my regular job now. I can make money off this.
And this is fun. I enjoy what I'm doing.
Exactly.
And I don't want to stop doing this when I'm 50, right? Like there's so many people these days post-COVID that have changed their perspective. A lot of people that thought they wanted to work till 65 now want to retire at 58. So what does that mean? So that it makes our job really fun. It makes us very important to our end client, because how are they going to pay for healthcare? What do they do to bridge the gap to Social Security? Is Social Security going to be there for them? When should they take it? Those things become so important, and they need a trusted advisor to make sure that they can get to where they ultimately want to go. But people don't want to work to that traditional 65 these days. So planning ahead and planning young becomes more and more important.
You ever read The 4-Hour Work Week?
I have.
Yeah. I mean, that book, it's a great book.
Yeah.
But it's cool how they talk about like mini retirements, right? Wouldn't you rather be able to take 6 months off when you're 40 or
Agreed.
a year off? It's like, do you really ever want to stop working? If you're enjoying what you're doing, you always want to have, a little skin in the game. You always want to be involved.
Sure.
But being able to take those intermittent vacations / retirements, whatever it is, or maybe, hey, I just got to take a summer to decompress. I mean, being able to do that, I think, is probably going to be, a good thing for you in the long run, as opposed to, hey, I'm going to work till I'm 65. Who knows if you'll make it to 65? Who knows what kind of shape and health you'll be in at 65?
Exactly.
Why don't enjoy life today, work hard, but also know that, like, hey, I always will find ways to bring value and maybe make money, even if I don't need it at some point. It's just kind of an interesting point of like, it's not the traditional view, right? I'm working till 65.
And I've seen 400 to 500 successful retirements that have helped people through, or one of my teammates have, and most of them don't fully retire, right? At the end of the day, people that fully retired you need some sort of passion in retirement. It could be something that makes you money, or it's got to be something that makes you happy, because going home, waking up later, drinking an extra few cups of coffee, and then wondering what to do with the rest of your day tends to age you faster. And I think most people that have retired successfully, in my vantage point, have found a second passion. It doesn't have to pay you, but you got to find something else that you're passionate about.
Yeah, it gives you that drive and that,
But no, you had a good point with the kids too, right? So yeah, kids are awesome, but they're expensive, and the discipline to save and think about where to save early on is important and crucial, because at the end of the day, if you want to just wait until after your kids get older and you say, oh, I'll just save more later, you're going to be so much farther behind. That whole rule 72, where, ultimately, if you can get a 7% return, your money doubles every 10 years. And that's a very reasonable goal, to try to get a 7% return with your money. So every year you wait, if you think about the person that saves when they're 40 and they save $100,000 by the time they're 40, by the time they're 50, that's $200,000. Then it's $400,000. But if you started that and you had that when you were 25 and you had $100,000, by the time you get there, that exponential growth at the end could get you into the couple $1 million range. So it's a big difference to save early. So just having some discipline to save early is something that I think my peers and kind of who I would give advice to that was in their early 20s, just get a discipline to saving, set it, forget it, and make sure that you're saving it in some low cost investment, some index fund, and go focus on things that matter more to you.
Yeah. Well, they attribute Warren Buffett's success. Obviously, he's had great returns, but he's also been in the market for so long that exponential return, right? He's almost in his 90s, I think.
Exactly.
Right? So he's had that time. He's been investing since he was like 15.
Exactly.
Think about the time you invest $5,000 and you're 15 and you're 90. what does that turn into?
Exactly. And his advice is basically the foundation of what Rockbridge does is we focus on the planning, we focus on the things that move the needle, but we have a full investment committee. We have a chief investment officer that focuses on the investments, but we still do it with low cost investment vehicles. We still do it with ETFs, index funds, because at the end of the day, that is what sound investing is. Sure, if you want to put 3 to 5% of your money in Apple or Tesla or something because you find it fun, go for it.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, the other 95% of your money should be invested the correct way, the non-emotional way, to help meet your long-term goals.
Well, I think a big part of that too is we're talking about saving money. Is I don't care who you are, if that money's sitting in your checking account,
it's not doing anything for you.
It's not doing anything for you, but it burns a hole in everyone's pocket in a sense of, oh, I have this amount. Yeah, sure. Let's get this tonight. Oh yeah, let's get the steak. We'll get that nice bottle of wine, whatever it is. And then, think about that compounding over the years where if the first day that paycheck hits your account, you take out that 15%, goes in those index funds or whatever it may be, you don't even see it.
Yeah.
And then it's like, that's that, not interested investing, right? No emotion. It just happens every month, whether market's down, market's up. That's how you build wealth.
Yeah. And you need to have a spouse that's on board with your plan, right? Or your combined plan. And ultimately, hopefully I can maximize my human capital and still enjoy that nice bottle of wine now. But I'd also rather enjoy some of that stuff with my kids later on in life and make sure that I'm not going backwards once I decide I don't want to work this hard. So ultimately, you got to think forward if you want to have that successful retirement, and not look at social media is great, but it also makes everybody think. Everyone posts the best version of themselves or what they want people think the best version of themselves is on social media. So if you're chasing that and you're trying to match all your friends on social media, you're just going to set yourself up to be unhappy. And so I think it forces people to save less than they ultimately would otherwise.
Keeping up with the Joneses is at an all-time high because of social media.
Exactly.
You see what they're doing. You feel like you need to do it.
Exactly.
Even if you don't want to do it. It's kind of like the last podcast I was with Michael Leary, and that's just human nature to be envious and a little jealous. And it's like, you see someone have success doing something, you get jealous and you're like, wait, why am I jealous? Like, I don't even want to do that. Why am I jealous of that? It's kind of like with oh, I see you doing something. Oh, I should do that with my family. Do I even want to do that?
Right.
Like, you're just doing it to do it because you want to be able to post it on social media. Yeah. And you're like, yeah, everyone's guilty of it. But then when you kind of step back and look, you're like, what am I doing? Like, exactly. Think about what this could save me, over time. Now I'm going to have, when I'm 65, we talked about maybe you don't want to just retire, but I'm going to have the flexibility to do whatever I want.
Exactly.
Isn't that the goal?
And maybe not 65, maybe
50, maybe
figure out what your goal is.
Exactly.
But if you don't have a plan, you'll never get there, right? So hopefully Rockbridge helps people establish what their plan is, how realistic it is, and really what that number is they need to save to make it happen, so that they can be the couple can be on the same page to say, this is where we want to get to. We have a plan. Let's execute it over the next 10 years so that we can do everything we want to do.
When you get young couples in, or, young single people, is there anything that you look at, like, your older clients who are hitting retirement age, that you say, hey, based off these clients, these are a few things you should be focused on? Something that might be overlooked for someone in their 20s or 30s. It's like, hey, you're not thinking about this now, but something in the back of your head, keep this in mind. Obviously, saving, we've talked about that. Is there anything else, any sort of, I think like long-term care, right? One of those.
Sure.
Or it's kind of like an insurance that covers, if you were to go to a nursing home or you have a nurse come in, is there anything else that as a 30-year-old, 20-year-old, you should keep in mind of, like, yeah, it's not going to hit you tomorrow, but before you know it, you don't want it to creep up too late?
For most people, so the first thing is, most of the people you're talking about are having kids, right? Yeah. So you need to establish a will, and that will doesn't matter. It's not like you have a bunch of money that you want to leave somewhere, but ultimately your will cover guardianship. So it'll say, who do you want to take care of my children? God forbid something happens to the two of us. So you should establish a relationship with an estate planning attorney that is willing to and help you establish a will so that you can cover the basis there. So that's number one. I think that's extremely important. You should be able to do that very cost effectively because it's a very simple will. We really only care about the guardianship piece. Next is life insurance. So find out if you have, do you have income discrepancy between you and your spouse? There's one, like in my particular situation, my wife is now staying home, but she was working, but we had income discrepancies. So the question is, God forbid something happened to me, what do we need to make sure that we can pay off the house, put enough money aside to make sure that both of our boys can go to college without my wife worrying about the stressors around that. And then ultimately some additional monies for the next X amount of years to make sure that there's a normalcy in lifestyle. So what is that number? How do we figure out what it is? And then make sure you go buy pure term insurance and not some sort of
whole life.
Whole life's okay. Whole life is a forced savings mechanism. My advice is typically to keep insurance and keep investing completely separate, but whole life is fine. But ultimately
Better than nothing.
Better than nothing. But I would ultimately buy pure term insurance. Basically, it's like having insurance on your house. You hope you never need it. You hope you never have to do it. It's dirt cheap, but it'll give you a larger amount of coverage for a very low cost. So focus on that and figure out what that number is. For most people, it could be $500,000, it could be $2 million, but it's affordable. It's maybe 50 to 75 bucks a month, depending on how early you put it in place and how healthy you are. So cover those two things. And then lastly, maximize Roth IRAs. So from an order of operations, you should be maximizing your employer match. So putting as much money in as it takes to get all the money your employer will give you. So for most people, if you put in 5%, your employer will give you 4%. That's kind of like a typical safe harbor match that most people have in place. And then above and beyond that, dump money into Roth IRAs, especially when your income isn't as high as you ultimately want it to be when you retire. That money in Roth IRAs will grow tax-free, and eventually you'll be able to take it out tax-free. So it's basically the best place you can save, and most people aren't taking advantage of it.
What is it, 7,500 for an individual?
It's up to 8 this year. 8,000.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
and then what about for like a couple?
A couple can each do $8,000.
Oh, okay. So
but there's
doubles.
income limits. So for your higher earning couples, there's ways around it. There's a strategy called backdoor Roth savings. So you could work with an advisor and figure out how to save in a Roth IRA still, but ultimately it's the best savings vehicle, and you should be taking advantage of it if you are.
So 99% of people should be able to save in a Roth IRA.
Yeah.
That makes sense. And yeah, I mean, I guess for those who don't know what it is, it's a post-tax avenue to save, but it grows tax-free, and you can take it out tax-free.
You got it.
But not until you're 65.
So you can't get 59, 59 and a half. You can't get the earnings out, but you can always get your principal. So I have people that are still like, you almost have, you want to have a high emergency fund, but at the end of the day, you're probably never going to use that emergency fund. You can almost view the basis or your contributions to your Roth as money that you can have access to if you need it. You probably never will. So I have people at least maximize the annual amount regardless, as long as they have a comfortable emergency fund, because you can never get that back.
Yeah.
That $8,000 limit, next year it's not 16. You got to take advantage of the 8 this year to get it again next year.
It doesn't roll over.
No.
You talked about kids, and having kids, not only is it something that you need to be focused on, right? You want to set up your family to be comfortable, whether you're getting your retirement age, you're right, they're going through college, young professional. But ultimately the goal is to make sure that they're financially responsible and they have a good financial education, which I think is lacking in traditional education, especially at a young age.
Yeah.
You got young kids. Is there anything that you think about? I think back to my parents, and then there's never like a sit down, all right, we're going to go over finances, or these are some games that are going to help you understand, how to be financially successful. But just like looking back, some of the things you mentioned, they were both, very frugal.
Yeah.
And like, I didn't really notice it. Sometimes when I was a kid, I'd be like, oh, wow, they're cheap. But it wasn't cheap. It was like, we talked about the Disney World example. We never went to Disney World, but we'd visit my parents or my grandparents in Florida. We go to like Busch Gardens.
Yeah.
And it was like
It was
probably
so much
half the
fun.
price,
Yeah.
and the shorter lines, and we probably had more fun there than we would have had at Disney, right? And my parents knew that, and they're like, "Hey, it's cheaper, and they're gonna have just as much fun, right?" They're not sacrificing us having fun as a kid, but they know, how to stretch the dollar in a sense of, having fun, having good family time. Is there anything that you focus on, or do you just try to be a good role model? Talk about how you want to set your kids up for success and things you do to maybe do that.
Yeah. That's a good question. And it's harder these days because I think most parents going into this are still struggling with that financial responsibility themselves, right? So how do you emulate good qualities in your kids to make sure that you set them up for success ultimately? And I don't know, I have a similar background as you. My mom and dad, we grew up on a farm, so we did fun things when it rained.
Yeah,
If it wasn't
around the farm.
if the weather was nice, we were working.
Yeah.
So I still stick to, you got to just teach work ethic, right? And especially in today's day and age, and I don't know what my kids will eventually do someday, but I know that the world is evolving, AI and everything that's out there. The one thing that stuff can't do is it can't teach human skills. It can't take over some of the things that I feel I'm good at and have separated me from some of my peers and helped me get to where I'm at. So at the end of the day, I'm hoping that my kids understand that I work really hard. I'm passionate about what I do, and I'm passionate about them being successful. And hopefully, if I do that over and over again, they'll understand that work ethic's important. And if I work hard, if I teach my kids that working hard is important, I'm confident they'll be successful regardless of what they do.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you want to set your kids up for success, but you don't want to set them up where they're relying on you, right? I think back to the Millionaire Next Door, the economic outpatient care.
Yeah.
Right. You don't want your kids in their 30s having you pay their credit card. Right? That's the last thing you want. As much as you want to give them opportunity, you want to give them enough money to do what they want, but you want them to have that drive. You want them to be responsible, because ultimately, the saying goes, the second generation wealth is the one that tends to lose it.
It is. And I don't know it to be true, but I feel like part of my success has been the fact that I played sports. I went through sports. I had to rely on teammates. I had to build teammates up when they were down. If you wanted to be successful, you understand that it's not all about you. It's about this group of people around you and making them better versions of themselves. So putting your kids in situations where they have to work with other kids, I think, is a really good way to start getting them prepared for what they're going to face later on in life. So team sports is something that I'm going to always encourage my kids to do.
Yeah. Yeah, that's huge. And just be an example. I think of you. I mean, you probably felt the same way, but who are the best captains? The ones that were just doing everything they're supposed to be doing, working hard, right? They weren't always the rah, give the great speech, talk, because that can be good at times. But at the end of the day, it comes down to actually doing it.
Yeah.
Right. And if you day after day after day are that role model that you want to be for your kids, it's going to rub off on them.
Exactly.
Even at the teenage years, if it doesn't seem like it is, at some point they're going to look back and they're going to have the appreciation, and they're going to have the knowledge of what it takes, or, they're going to have the footprint to maybe be in the similar shoes that you are in.
Yeah. And if you turn that back into a sports analogy, I'm sure not everybody loved Kobe Bryant through every practice you were in and everything else you were in. But at the end of the day, you look at Jordan, you look at Kobe, they had success, a lot of success. And at the end of the day, most of the people that played for them and with them, they say, yeah, I was outworked by them every day and it made me work harder.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, great place to end it, Pat. I'll let you get back to the office upstairs here, but thanks for coming on, and we'll have you on again soon.
Yeah, it was fun. I appreciate it.
Yeah.